Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
My mom sold my late father's beloved classic car to my stepbrother without even asking me. She brushed it off, saying, "It's just a car." But that car was everything to me. I quietly bought it back, but what I did next completely changed how she saw me. And I don't think she'll ever forget it. My dad loved his car. It wasn't just a car to him. It was a masterpiece, a symbol of his dedication and passion. A sleek, classic 1967 Mustang with cherry red paint that glimmered in the sun. It was the kind of car that turned heads wherever we went. He spent years restoring it, meticulously polishing every curve and upgrading its engine until it purred like a dream. Dad and I shared countless afternoons in that garage. Him with a wrench in hand, me holding a flashlight and trying to learn. Every weekend, we'd take it for a spin. The Mustang became our sanctuary, where he'd tell me stories about his wild teenage years, the first time he saw my mom, and the dreams he had for us as a family. When he passed away, the car became more than just a mode of transportation. It became a vessel for his memory. Sitting in the driver's seat made me feel like I was still sitting beside him. But life kept moving. A few years after Dad passed, Mom remarried. My new stepdad, Greg, and his son, Jake, moved in, bringing their clutter and noise into what used to be our quiet, organized home. Greg was decent enough, but he never really filled the gap Dad had left. Jake, on the other hand, was trouble from the start. Arrogant, entitled, and completely dismissive of anything that didn't revolve around him. I tried to be civil, but the changes felt like sandpaper on an open wound. Dad's tools were shoved into a corner to make room for Greg's beer fridge. The family photos on the mantle were replaced with generic ones of all of us together, even though it never really felt like a family. Through it all, the Mustang sat in the garage, untouched and sacred. It was the one piece of Dad that they hadn't encroached upon, or so I thought. One ordinary afternoon, I came home from work, tossed my bag on the couch, and headed to the garage. I had this habit of sitting in the Mustang when I needed to think or feel close to Dad. But as soon as I opened the door to the garage, I froze. The space where the Mustang had always been parked was empty. Completely empty. My heart started pounding as I scanned the garage, hoping I was somehow mistaken. But the tools, the oil stains, the faint smell of leather and engine grease, it was all still there, except for the car. I stormed into the house, adrenaline and panic coursing through me. "Mom!" I shouted, my voice echoing down the hallway. She appeared from the kitchen, looking startled, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What's wrong?" she asked, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes that told me she already knew. "Where's Dad's car?" I demanded. "It's gone. Did someone steal it?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then sighed. No one stole it. I sold it." For a moment, I couldn't process her words. "You what?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I sold it," she repeated, her tone maddeningly casual, like she was talking about getting rid of an old toaster. "Jake wanted it, and he's always been interested in cars." I thought it made sense. "You sold Dad's car to Jake?" My hands clenched in a fist at my sides. "Why would you do that? You know how much that car meant to me." "It's just a car," she said with a shrug, as if that was supposed to settle it. "It's not just a car," I shouted. "It's Dad's car. It's the last thing we had of him, and you just gave it away without even asking me." She folded her arms, her expression shifting into defensiveness. "Look, Jake's been wanting to get into classic cars, and it's been sitting in the garage collecting dust. I didn't think it was that big of a deal." I stared at her, trying to comprehend how she could be so dismissive. "You didn't think? That car is priceless to me, Mom. It's not about the money. It's about Dad." Her face softened for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a sigh. "I'm sorry you're upset, but it's done now. Jake bought it fair and square. Maybe it's time to let go of the past." Let go of the past? My blood boiled. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I sat down on my bed, staring at the floor. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Jake, or anyone else, keep that car. My dad's car wasn't just a memory. It was a piece of my heart, and I was going to get it back no matter what it took. From the moment my mom remarried, I always felt like an afterthought. Jake, my new stepbrother, had a knack for turning every room he entered into his personal stage. He was loud, obnoxious, and constantly sought attention, and my mom fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Suddenly, Jake's needs and opinions became her priority, while mine barely registered. Over time, I'd resigned myself to the dynamic. But this? Selling Dad's car to him without even asking me? That was a new low. It wasn't just that she sold the car. It was who she sold it to. Jake wasn't a car guy. He didn't even know the difference between a carburetor and a radiator. For him, the Mustang wasn't a labor of love or a cherished memory. It was a trophy. Something shiny to show off on Instagram or flaunt at parties. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe I was wrong, that maybe Jake had some appreciation for the car. But that hope was shattered the night I overheard him talking to one of his friends on the phone. I was walking past his room when I caught his voice, loud and cocky as always. "Yeah, dude, I got the Mustang," he said, laughing. "It's worth a fortune. Mom gave me a sweet deal on it, too. And get this, my loser stepbrother is totally losing his mind over it. It's hilarious. He actually thought he had some claim on it or something." I stopped dead in my tracks, my hands trembling with anger. I clenched my fists so hard my nails bit into my palms. Jake wasn't just indifferent to the car's sentimental value. He was mocking it. Mocking me. He didn't care about the car, or about Dad, or about what it represented. It was just a shiny toy for him to gloat over, a way to one-up me. I didn't confront him. Not then, anyway. I just walked away, my mind racing. Jake wasn't going to take care of the Mustang. He wasn't going to treat it with the love and respect it deserved. He was probably going to let it rot in some parking lot, or worse, flip it to the highest bidder the moment he got bored of it. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let that happen. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, not just at Jake, but at my mom. She knew how much that car meant to me. She had to know. Growing up, she'd seen how close Dad and I were, how the Mustang was practically a family member. She was there when Dad and I spent hours in the garage together, laughing and working side by side. But somehow, she dismissed all of that. Somehow, she decided Jake's whims were more important than my grief, my memories, or my connection to Dad. That night, I sat in my room, replaying everything in my mind. Jake's smug laugh, Mom's casual dismissal, the empty space in the garage. It felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit back and let them erase my dad's legacy. The car was more than a piece of metal. It was a symbol of everything Dad had worked for, everything he'd dreamed of. It was a part of him, and by extension, a part of me. The next day, I decided to scope things out. I needed to see what Jake was actually doing with the car. I knew he wasn't going to suddenly become a gearhead overnight, but part of me hoped he wasn't treating it as badly as I feared. When I got to his place, the Mustang was parked in the driveway. My chest tightened as I approached it. Seeing it there, out in the open, felt wrong. It wasn't just that it was Jake's driveway. It was the way the car looked. The paint was already starting to dull. There were smudges on the windows and dust gathering on the hood. It was clear he hadn't washed it, let alone cared for it. The pristine condition Dad had worked so hard to maintain was slipping away, and it hadn't even been a week. I peeked through the window and felt my stomach churn. The once spotless interior was already cluttered with trash, fast food wrappers, an empty soda can, and even a few cigarette butts. Dad would have been furious if he'd seen it. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I didn't hear Jake come out of the house. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. I turned to face him, struggling to keep my anger in check. "Just checking out the car," I said evenly. "It doesn't look like you've been taking very good care of it." He smirked, leaning against the Mustang like it was some kind of prop. "Relax, man. It's just a car." "Just a car?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea what this car meant to Dad? What it means to me?" Yeah, I get it," he said dismissively. "It was your dad's car. Big deal. But newsflash, it's mine now. I paid for it, and I'll do whatever I want with it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "If you don't care about it, why don't you just sell it back to me?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Sell it back to you? Are you kidding?" "Nah, I think I'll hang on to it. It's worth way more than you could afford, anyway." I clenched my jaw, every muscle in my body screaming to punch that smug look off his face. But I didn't. I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I turned and walked away, his laughter ringing in my ears. That night, I made a vow. Jake wasn't going to keep the Mustang, not if I could help it. Dad's car didn't belong with someone who saw it as just a status symbol or a way to spite me. It belonged with someone who understood its worth, someone who would cherish it the way Dad had. And that someone was me. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let Jake win. Not this time. The moment I decided I had to get the Mustang back, I knew it wouldn't be easy. Jake wasn't the kind of person to give anything up without making it as difficult as possible, even if he didn't care about it. But the thought of Dad's car deteriorating in Jake's careless hands fueled my determination. I didn't tell Jake or my mom what I was planning. I knew they wouldn't understand. First, I had to figure out how much I'd need. Jake had bragged about getting the Mustang for cheap, and knowing his laziness, I doubted he'd done the research to understand its true worth. I started casually dropping hints during conversations, asking about the car's condition or whether he'd looked into getting it appraised. He'd usually brush me off with comments like, "It's fine," or "I'll deal with it later." That confirmed what I already suspected. Jake didn't care about the Mustang beyond its ability to annoy me. Meanwhile, I started saving. I picked up extra shifts at work, often staying late or volunteering to cover for coworkers. I combed through my belongings, deciding what I could sell without too much regret. My old gaming console, a barely used guitar, and even a few collectibles I'd held onto for years. All of it went up for sale. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I questioned whether it was worth the effort. But then I'd close my eyes and picture the Mustang gleaming in the garage where it belonged, and the doubt would disappear. After a couple of months, I'd saved up enough to make an offer. It wasn't as much as the car was truly worth, but I knew Jake would bite if I framed it right. He'd already proven that he didn't see the car as anything more than a flashy toy. All I had to do was make him think he was getting the better end of the deal. One Saturday, I dropped by Jake's place unannounced. The Mustang was still parked in the driveway, looking more neglected than ever. The dust had thickened, and one of the tires was slightly deflated. It hurt to see the car in such a state, but it also reinforced my resolve. Jake answered the door, a bag of chips in one hand and his phone in the other. "What's up?" he asked, clearly uninterested in whatever I had to say. "I wanted to talk about the Mustang," I said, keeping my tone casual. He rolled his eyes. "Dude, I already told you it's mine now. You need to get over it." "I know," I replied quickly, not wanting to give him a chance to escalate. "But hear me out. You've had it for a few months now, and it doesn't look like you're really doing much with it. I figured maybe you'd want to sell it and use the money for something you actually care about." He frowned, considering my words. "Sell it? To you? Why not?" I shrugged, trying to look indifferent. "I'm willing to pay. You'd get the cash, and I'd get the car. It's a win-win." He leaned against the door frame, clearly debating. "How much are we talking?" Here was the critical moment. I threw out a number that I thought was fair, but still low enough to tempt him. Just enough to make it seem like he'd be walking away with easy money. To my surprise, he didn't haggle. He smirked and said, "Deal?" I was so stunned by how easily he agreed that I almost didn't believe him. "You're serious?" "Yeah," he said with a shrug. "It's not like I was going to do anything with it anyway. And honestly, it's kind of a pain to keep it around. You've got the cash on you now." I had prepared for this, withdrawing the money earlier that day. I handed it over without hesitation, and Jake tossed me the keys like he was handing off an old pair of sneakers. Just like that, the Mustang was mine again. The drive home was surreal. Sitting behind the wheel felt like a long-lost piece of myself had clicked back into place. The car wasn't in the best shape after months of neglect, but it still had that unmistakable spirit. When I pulled into the driveway, my mom was outside watering the plants. She froze the moment she saw the Mustang. Her eyes widened, and for a second, she looked genuinely speechless, a rare sight. Finally, she managed to say, "You bought it back?" I climbed out of the car and gave her a steady look. "Yeah, I did." "Why would you waste your money like that?" she asked, setting down the watering can. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "It's not a waste, Mom. This car meant everything to Dad, and it means everything to me. You never should have sold it in the first place." She sighed, shaking her head. "I thought you moved on by now. It's just a car. You can't hold on to the past forever." "It's not just a car," I said, my voice firm. "It's a part of Dad, a part of our family, and you don't get to decide what it means to me." She opened her mouth to respond, but didn't say anything. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. I walked past her, parked the Mustang in the garage, and shut the door. That night, I sat in the driver's seat, running my hands over the steering wheel. The garage was quiet except for the faint hum of crickets outside. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The Mustang was back where it belonged. But as I stared at the car, an idea began to form in my mind. Buying it back was just the first step. If I wanted to truly honor Dad's memory, I needed to do more than just keep the car. I needed to restore it to its former glory, just the way he would have wanted. The thought made my heart race with excitement and nerves. I didn't know much about restoration, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to do whatever it took to make this car a masterpiece again. Getting the Mustang back wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning. As I sat in the garage that first night, the keys dangling in my hand, I thought about Dad and all the stories he used to tell me about his plans for the car. He had always dreamed of fully restoring it, turning it into a gleaming, roaring masterpiece that could rival any showroom vehicle. Life, unfortunately, got in the way, and he never got the chance. Now, with the car back in my possession, I decided it was time to finish what he started. Restoring the Mustang wasn't just about fixing up a car. It was about honoring Dad's memory and preserving the bond we shared. I wanted to make him proud, even if he wasn't here to see it. The first step was figuring out where to begin. I spent hours researching restoration shops, reading reviews, and calling around to see who had the expertise to bring Dad's vision to life. Eventually, I found a small, family-owned shop a few towns over. The owner, Carl, was a soft-spoken man with a deep love for classic cars. When I explained what I wanted to do, he didn't try to upsell me or rush me into anything. He just smiled and said, "Let's make it happen." Dropping the car off at the shop was both exciting and nerve-wracking. I was putting it in someone else's hands, trusting that they would treat it with the care it deserved. Carl walked me through the process, showing me what needed to be done and how long it would take. We decided to strip the car down to its bones and rebuild it from the ground up. Everything from the engine to the upholstery to the iconic cherry red paint. "I want to help," I told Carl. "Whatever you need me to do, I'm in." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Restoration's not as glamorous as it looks in the movies. It's a lot of grease, sweat, and cursing." "I'm sure," I said firmly. And that's how I found myself spending every free moment at the shop. Carl and his team taught me everything. How to sand down rusted metal, how to rewire electrical systems, how to tune an engine until it hummed like a song. It was hard work, but it was worth every second. Every time I worked on the car, I felt closer to Dad. I could almost hear his voice in my head, guiding me, laughing at my mistakes and cheering me on. As the weeks turned into months, the Mustang began to transform. The rusty patches were replaced with sleek, polished panels. The dull, neglected paint was stripped away, making room for a fresh coat of that signature cherry red finish. The engine was completely rebuilt, every piece cleaned and adjusted until it was as good as new. I started documenting the restoration process online, sharing photos and updates with friends and car enthusiasts. The response was overwhelming. People were fascinated by the journey, and I started receiving messages from strangers who had their own stories about classic cars and lost loved ones. "This is incredible," one person wrote. "It's not just a car, it's a piece of your dad's legacy. Keep going." Another person said, "My dad and I used to work on cars together too. Seeing this makes me want to pick up a wrench again. Thank you for sharing." The support was humbling, and it gave me even more motivation to see the project through. I made sure to keep the final look a secret from everyone, even my mom and Jake. I wanted the finished car to be a surprise, a bold, undeniable statement about what the Mustang truly represented. Working on the Mustang became my escape. Every day, I'd wake up excited to see how much progress we could make. The hours flew by as I learned to appreciate every detail, from the smooth curve of the fenders to the intricate stitching on the new leather seats. One day, as Carl and I were installing the new dashboard, he looked at me and said, "You know, you're a natural at this. Your dad would be proud." Hearing those words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on the work that I hadn't taken a moment to reflect on what it all meant. I wiped my hands on a rag and sat down, staring at the car. "I hope so," I said quietly. "He would," Carl said with a nod. "You're not just fixing up a car. You're keeping a part of him alive. That's something special." As the restoration neared completion, I started to feel a mix of emotions: pride, excitement, and even a little sadness. The journey had been transformative, but I knew it was coming to an end. Soon, the Mustang would be ready to hit the road, and I'd finally be able to show everyone what I had been working so hard on. One night, after finishing a late shift at the shop, I sat in the Mustang and turned on the radio. The engine wasn't fully functional yet, but the electrical system was up and running. I flipped through the stations until I landed on one of Dad's favorite songs, an old rock ballad we used to listen to during our weekend drives. As the music filled the car, I closed my eyes and let myself feel everything: the joy, the grief, the love. For the first time in years, I felt like Dad was right there with me, and I knew I was doing the right thing. The final step was the paint job. I watched as the team carefully applied layer after layer of that deep, glossy red, making sure every inch of the car gleamed like new. When it was done, the Mustang looked even better than I remembered. It was a work of art, a testament to Dad's vision and our shared passion. I couldn't wait to show it off. But more than that, I couldn't wait to see the look on Mom's face, and Jake's, when they realized what I had done. This car wasn't just a possession. It was a piece of my soul, a tribute to the man who had taught me so much about life, love, and hard work. And now, It was ready to take its place as the masterpiece Dad had always dreamed it could be. After nearly a year of sweat, late nights, and moments of doubt, the Mustang was finally finished. When I walked into the restoration shop that morning to pick it up, I almost didn't recognize it. The car looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line in 1967. The cherry red paint gleamed under the shop lights, smooth as glass, and the chrome accents sparkled like jewelry. Carl handed me the keys with a proud grin, and I couldn't stop smiling as I slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life with a deep, throaty purr that made my chest vibrate. It was perfect, every detail meticulously restored, from the leather stitching on the seats to the polished wood on the steering wheel. It was more than a car. It was a masterpiece. As I drove it home, heads turned on the street, people craning their necks to get a better look, I felt a surge of pride, but it wasn't just about the car. It was about honoring Dad's memory, about finishing what he started. I decided the reveal had to be something special. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a story that deserved to be shared. I planned a small party and invited close friends and family. I wanted them to see not only the car, but also the effort and love that went into it. My heart raced as I sent out the invitations, especially the ones to my mom and Jake. I knew their reactions would be the most telling. The day of the party was bright and sunny, the kind of day Dad would have loved for a long drive in the Mustang. I parked the car in the driveway and covered it with a tarp, making sure every inch was hidden until the right moment. The guests began arriving in the afternoon, filling the yard with chatter and laughter. Most of them were friends who had followed the restoration journey online, excited to see the final product in person. When Mom and Jake showed up, I watched their reactions carefully. Mom looked curious but cautious, as if she wasn't sure what to expect. Jake, on the other hand, had that smug look he always wore, the one that said he thought he was better than everyone else in the room. "Is this why you invited us?" Jake asked, glancing around. "To show off some big project you've been working on?" I smiled, keeping my tone even. "Something like that. You'll see soon enough." As the guests settled in, I stood in front of the tarp-covered Mustang and cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming." I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "This isn't just a car. It's a tribute to my dad, to the memories we shared, and to the dreams he had. I spent the last year restoring it, and I think he'd be proud of how it turned out." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Then, with a flourish, I pulled the tarp away. The reaction was immediate. There were gasps, followed by a wave of applause and excited chatter. The Mustang stood there, gleaming in the sunlight, its cherry red paint glowing like fire. The chrome wheels sparkled, and the fresh leather interior was visible through the open windows. It was stunning, a testament to countless hours of hard work and love. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You actually did all this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "For Dad." Jake, meanwhile, tried to act unimpressed, but I saw the way his jaw tightened and his eyes lingered on the car. "Looks nice," he said casually, but his tone couldn't hide the envy. As the guests crowded around the Mustang, taking photos and admiring the details, I watched Mom closely. Her expression shifted from shock to something deeper, something I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just surprise or amazement. It was guilt. After the initial excitement died down, Mom pulled me aside. "I didn't realize," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't realize what?" I asked, crossing my arms. "I didn't realize how much this car meant to you," she admitted. "When I sold it, I don't know what I thought. I guess I didn't understand." I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. "You didn't understand because you didn't want to. You didn't take the time to ask or to see what this car really meant to me, to Dad, to our family. You just decided it didn't matter." Her eyes filled with tears, and for once, she didn't try to defend herself. "You're right," she said softly. "I was wrong." Hearing her admit that felt strange, like a mix of relief and sadness. "It's not just a car," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "It's a piece of Dad, and when you sold it, it felt like you were erasing him." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I see that now, and I'm sorry. Truly." As the party went on, people kept coming up to me to share their thoughts on the Mustang. Some talked about how it reminded them of their own dads, their own memories of working on cars or going for long drives. Others simply marveled at the craftsmanship and detail. Jake, however, stayed in the background sulking. At one point, he approached me, trying to mask his jealousy with a forced grin. "You know," he said, "if you ever decide to sell it, I'll make you an offer." I shook my head, smiling politely but firmly. It's not for sale. He scoffed, muttering something under his breath, and walked away. I didn't care. This wasn't about him. It never was. That night, as the guests left and the yard grew quiet, I stood in the driveway, staring at the Mustang. Mom came up beside me, her expression soft and contemplative. Your dad would be proud, she said quietly. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I think so too. In that moment, I knew the Mustang wasn't just a car or a project. It was a legacy, a reminder of everything Dad had taught me about love, perseverance, and family. And now, it was finally where it belonged. By the time the party wound down and most of the guests had left, the house was quiet again. The Mustang sat in the driveway, illuminated by the soft glow of the porch light. The excitement of the day had settled, leaving me with a mix of pride and exhaustion. I stayed outside for a while, running my fingers along the smooth, polished surface of the car, reflecting on everything it had taken to get to this point. I heard the door creak open behind me. You're still out here? Mom's voice was soft, almost hesitant. I turned to see her standing on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, as if shielding against the cool night air. There was something different about her demeanor, something I couldn't quite place. She wasn't wearing the composed, almost dismissive mask I'd grown used to. Instead, she looked vulnerable. Yeah, I said, leaning against the car. Just thinking. She stepped down from the porch and walked over to me, her gaze fixed on the Mustang. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence hung between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, she broke it. I didn't realize how much this car meant to you, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where she was going with this. You didn't? She shook her head, her eyes glistening. No, I didn't. When I sold it, I don't know what I thought. I guess I just saw it as stuff. Just another thing sitting in the garage, taking up space. Her words stung, even though I could tell she wasn't trying to hurt me. It wasn't just stuff, I said, my voice firmer than I intended. It was Dad's. It was ours. I see that now, she said, her voice cracking. Watching you today, seeing how much love and effort you put into restoring it. I can't believe I didn't see it before. Your dad would have been so proud of what you did. I turned away, staring at the car to avoid looking at her. It hurt, you know, I said after a moment. When you sold it, it felt like you were taking him away from me all over again. Like you were erasing him. I didn't mean to, she said, her voice trembling. I thought moving on meant letting go of the past. But I realize now that I was wrong. I'm sorry for taking it away from you. I'm sorry for not understanding. For the first time in years, I felt like she genuinely meant it. There was no defensiveness in her tone, no attempt to justify her actions. Just an honest, heartfelt apology. It doesn't erase everything, I said, my voice softer now. But it helps? She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. I want to do better, she said. I want to be better. For you. For your dad. He loved you so much, and I hate that I didn't see how important this was to you. I looked at her, then really looked at her. For so long, I'd been holding on to my anger, my resentment, my sense of betrayal. But in that moment, I saw not the woman who had made mistakes, but the mother who was trying to make amends. Thanks, Mom, I said quietly. But maybe next time, don't make decisions about Dad's things without asking me first. She gave a small, bittersweet smile. Fair enough. We stood there together, the Mustang a silent witness to our conversation. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on the same page, like we were starting to bridge the gap that had grown between us over the years. As we talked, she opened up about her struggles after Dad's death, how she'd felt lost, how she'd made choices she wasn't proud of in an attempt to keep things together. It didn't excuse everything, but it gave me a new perspective. You know, she said after a while, her gaze drifting to the car, when your dad first bought this thing, I thought he was crazy. I didn't understand why he cared so much about a hunk of metal. She laughed softly, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. But watching him work on it, seeing how happy it made him, I got it eventually. And now, seeing what you've done with it, I get it even more. I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. It's not just a car, I said, echoing the words I'd told her so many times before. No, she said, shaking her head. It's not. Before she went back inside, she placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, she said. I don't think I've said that enough, but I am. And I know your dad would be too. Her words stayed with me long after she'd gone. I sat in the Mustang for a while, the cool leather seat beneath me, the faint scent of the new upholstery mingling with the old memories still etched into the car's frame. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still things left unsaid, wounds that would take time to heal. But it was a start, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. As I turned the key in the ignition and listened to the engine's low, steady purr, I couldn't help but smile. Dad's dream was alive, and so was the connection he'd left behind. This wasn't just a car, it was a bridge, one that had brought us back together in ways I never expected. The week after the reveal, I was still riding the high of seeing everyone's reactions to the Mustang. Friends couldn't stop talking about it, and even Mom seemed to have turned a corner, her demeanor softer and more thoughtful. But Jake? Well, I should have known he wouldn't take it lying down. At first, it was subtle, pointed comments in the group chat, vague digs that barely veiled his frustration. Must be nice to have time to waste on vanity projects, he texted one day, though we both knew who the message was meant for. I ignored it. I wasn't about to stoop to his level. Then one evening my phone buzzed. It was Jake. The message was short and to the point. Hey man, I've been thinking, and I kind of regret selling the Mustang. I wasn't in the right headspace when I agreed to it, and I feel like I made a mistake. I want to buy it back. I'll pay you what you gave me, plus extra. What do you say? I stared at the screen, shaking my head. Typical Jake. He didn't care about the car when he had it, but now that it looked like something out of a classic car magazine, suddenly he was regretting the sale. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to make sure I worded my reply carefully, knowing Jake had a knack for twisting things to suit his narrative. Finally, I typed out a message. It's not for sale, Jake. Sorry. Almost immediately, the typing bubble appeared. Come on, man. Be reasonable. You already got the satisfaction of fixing it up. Just sell it back to me. I'll give you a good deal. I took a deep breath, my patience already wearing thin. It's not about money, I replied. The car means something to me. I'm keeping it. His response came faster this time, and his tone had shifted from persuasive to petulant. So, you're just gonna hoard it? That's selfish, dude. I was trying to do something nice by selling it to you in the first place, and this is how you repay me. I couldn't help but laugh at the audacity. Jake, you sold it because you didn't care about it. Don't act like you were doing me a favor. And I'm not hoarding it. I'm taking care of it, which is more than you ever did. The messages stopped for a while, and I thought maybe he'd finally dropped it. But an hour later, my phone buzzed again. Wow, I see how it is. You've always been this way, haven't you? Acting like you're better than me just because of some car. Whatever, man. Enjoy being a selfish jerk. Selfish. That word stuck in my mind, not because I believed it, but because it was so absurd coming from Jake. The same Jake who had bragged about taking the car just to spite me, who had let it sit in his driveway collecting dust, now accusing me of being selfish. It was laughable. I didn't bother responding. There was no point in arguing with someone who wasn't willing to listen. Besides, I wasn't about to let him derail the joy I felt every time I looked at the Mustang. Over the next few days, Jake's attempts to guilt me grew more desperate. He started calling, leaving voicemails where his tone swung wildly between pleading and angry. I just think it's messed up that you won't even consider it, he said in one message. You're being so petty about this. You're not the only one who knew your dad, you know? Hearing him try to play the victim was infuriating, but I refused to engage. Every time he tried to twist the narrative, I reminded myself why I had fought so hard to get the car back in the first place. It wasn't about Jake. It wasn't even about me. It was about honoring Dad's memory and keeping a part of him alive. Eventually, Jake seemed to realize I wasn't going to budge. The texts and calls stopped, and he unfollowed me on social media, a move that I'm sure he thought would sting more than it did. Honestly, I was relieved. The silence was a welcome change, and it gave me the space to focus on what really mattered. I spent my weekends driving the Mustang on the back roads Dad used to love, the windows down and the wind rushing through the car. Sometimes I'd bring a friend along, but more often than not, I went alone. Those drives were my time to think, to remember, to feel connected to Dad in a way that nothing else could replicate. One Sunday, as I was pulling back into the driveway, I saw Mom standing on the porch. She watched as I parked the car, her expression a mix of pride and something else, something more wistful. You went for a drive? She asked as I climbed out. Yeah, I said, smiling. Same route Dad used to take. It's kind of become a tradition. She nodded, her eyes lingering on the car. I never realized how much it meant to him. To you? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I ran my hand along the Mustang's hood, feeling the cool metal beneath my fingers. It's more than just a car, I said finally. She smiled faintly. I know that now. and I'm glad it's with you. Jake and I didn't speak for weeks after his failed attempts to buy the car back, and honestly, I didn't miss the tension. For once, I felt like I could enjoy the Mustang without the shadow of his entitlement hanging over me. But part of me wondered if this was the beginning of a permanent rift between us. As much as Jake and I had our differences, he was still family, at least on paper. I wasn't sure what the future held for our relationship, but I knew one thing for certain. The Mustang wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't about winning or proving a point. It wasn't about revenge. It was about preserving something bigger than myself, something that represented love, memory, and legacy. And no amount of guilt-tripping or manipulation was going to change that. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly honoring Dad's spirit. And that was worth more than anything Jake could offer. Once the dust settled from Jake's tantrums and the Mustang was fully mine again, life began to feel different. Driving the car wasn't just about the thrill of the open road or the rumble of the engine anymore. It was about the memories tied to every curve of the leather seat, every click of the gear shift, and every turn on those familiar back roads. It became a ritual, something I looked forward to all week. Every Sunday morning, I'd grab the keys, roll the windows down, and take the Mustang for a long drive. The route was always the same, the one Dad and I used to take together. It was scenic, winding through rolling hills and quiet stretches of countryside, with just enough twists to keep it interesting. The air smelled of fresh grass and sunlight, and the sound of the engine echoed off the trees like music. Driving that route was my way of keeping Dad close. I'd play the same old rock songs he used to love, letting the familiar riffs and lyrics carry me back to those days when he was still here. Sometimes I'd talk to him, my voice soft over the hum of the engine, sharing updates about my life, or just thanking him for everything he taught me. It might have seemed silly to anyone else, but to me it felt natural, like he was riding shotgun just like he always used to. Word started to get around about the Mustang. Friends who'd followed its restoration on social media began asking if they could come along for a drive. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. The drives were personal, almost sacred. But then I realized that sharing the car and the experience didn't take away from its meaning. It added to it. One Sunday, my friend Evan joined me. He'd always been a car enthusiast, but he'd never seen the Mustang up close. The moment he climbed in, he let out a low whistle. "Man, this is beautiful. I've seen the pictures, but in person, it's something else." I smiled, proud but humble. Yeah, it took a lot of work, but it was worth it. As we cruised along the back roads, we talked about everything: work, relationships, the struggles and triumphs of life. There was something about being in the car, surrounded by the hum of the engine and the open road, that made it easier to open up. It was like the Mustang had a way of breaking down walls, creating a space where people could just be themselves. Soon, other friends started asking to join. Some brought their own stories about classic cars, while others just enjoyed the ride and the conversation. We'd pile in, play Dad's favorite playlists, and let the road guide us. It wasn't long before the Sunday drives became a tradition, not just for me, but for everyone who came along. One Sunday, something unexpected happened. Mom asked if she could join me. I was surprised, to say the least. Since the reveal, she'd been more understanding about the Mustang, even supportive in her own, quiet way. But she'd never expressed an interest in riding in it. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying not to sound too shocked. She nodded. "Yeah, I think it's time." So that morning, I adjusted the passenger seat for her and made sure everything was perfect. As she climbed in, she ran her hand over the dashboard, her fingers lingering on the polished wood. "This brings back memories," she said softly. "Your dad loved this car so much." We started down the familiar route, the engine humming beneath us. At first, Mom was quiet, her eyes fixed on the passing scenery. I could tell she was lost in thought, maybe revisiting old memories of Dad. "Do you remember the first time he took you for a drive in this car?" she asked suddenly. I smiled. "Yeah, I think I was about 10. He told me to hold on tight, and then he hit the gas so hard I thought we were going to take off." She laughed, a genuine, heartfelt sound that I hadn't heard in a long time. He did the same thing to me when we first started dating. He thought it was hilarious. As we continued driving, the conversation flowed naturally, filled with stories about Dad that I'd never heard before. Mom's voice softened as she recounted how he'd spent hours in the garage, tinkering with the car, always talking about how he wanted to take it on a cross-country road trip someday. By the time we pulled back into the driveway, Mom's eyes were glistening with tears. She reached out and touched my arm. "Thank you for this," she said, "for keeping his dream alive." From that day on, the Sunday drives became even more special. It wasn't just about me and Dad's memory anymore. It was about bringing people together, creating new memories while honoring the old ones. The Mustang wasn't just a car. It was a time capsule, a bridge between past and present, a way of connecting with the people I cared about. It carried stories in its polished frame, memories in its purring engine, and love in every mile it traveled. One weekend, as I was washing the car in the driveway, a neighbor walked over and said, "You've got a real beauty there. Must be worth a fortune." I smiled, shaking my head. "It's priceless," I said, because it was true. No amount of money could ever replace what the Mustang meant to me. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a legacy, one that I intended to cherish for the rest of my life. And every Sunday, as the sun rose and the open road called, I knew that Dad was still with me, riding along in spirit, his dream alive and well in the hum of the Mustang's engine and the love it inspired in everyone who shared the journey. As time passed, the Mustang's significance in my life grew in ways I hadn't anticipated. What started as a mission to reclaim a piece of Dad's memory had become something much bigger, a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and learning to let go of things that no longer mattered. Reclaiming the Mustang felt like regaining a connection I thought I'd lost forever. It reminded me of Dad's laughter, the way he'd pat the hood after finishing a day of work on the car, and his quiet wisdom during those long drives. But as much as the Mustang represented him, I started to realize it wasn't just about Dad anymore. The car had become a symbol of my own growth, of learning to stand up for what I believed in and fighting for the things that truly mattered. For years, I had let people and circumstances push me aside. Jake's arrogance, Mom's dismissiveness, even my own hesitation to speak up. But this ordeal with the Mustang forced me to break that pattern. Standing my ground and reclaiming the car wasn't just about honoring Dad. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of fighting for what was important. Mom and I started to rebuild our relationship in the aftermath of the Mustang's restoration. It wasn't a smooth process. There were still moments of tension, old wounds that hadn't fully healed, but there was also a new sense of understanding between us. She began to ask questions about the Mustang, about Dad's plans for it, and the work I'd put into restoring it. One evening, she even joined me in the garage as I polished the chrome accents. "Do you think your dad would recognize it?" she asked, her voice tinged with nostalgia. I smiled. "I think he'd recognize the spirit of it. He'd definitely have notes, though. He always did." She chuckled, shaking her head. "He was a perfectionist, that's for sure. But he'd be proud of you." "I know I am." Her words caught me off guard. For so long, I'd been at odds with her, convinced that she didn't understand me or care about the things that mattered to me. Hearing her say she was proud felt like a small victory, a step toward mending what had been broken. Jake, on the other hand, remained distant. After his failed attempts to buy the Mustang back, he mostly stopped talking to me altogether. At first, I was annoyed. His sulking felt like just another way he was trying to manipulate the situation. But over time, I stopped caring. One day, he showed up unannounced at the house, his demeanor unusually subdued. "Hey," he said awkwardly, standing in the driveway as I worked on the Mustang. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He stared at the car for a moment, his hands shoved in his pockets. "I just wanted to say, I didn't mean to make things worse. I guess I didn't realize how much it meant to you." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest thing I'd ever gotten from Jake. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell him he'd had plenty of chances to understand. But another part of me was tired of holding onto the anger. "It's fine," I said simply. "I'm over it." And I was. For the first time, I genuinely felt like I didn't need his approval or his acknowledgement. The Mustang wasn't about proving anything to him or to anyone else. As the weeks turned into months, the Mustang became more than just a car. It became a symbol of resilience, not just for me, but for everyone who heard the story. Friends who had followed the restoration journey would often tell me how much it inspired them. One day, a coworker stopped me in the parking lot, her eyes lighting up as she spotted the Mustang. "Is this the car you were working on?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, smiling as I unlocked the door. "That's amazing," she said. "I read your post about it. My dad passed away a few years ago, and he had an old truck he used to work on. I always thought about fixing it up, but I never got around to it. Seeing what you've done with this, it makes me want to try." Hearing stories like that reminded me that the Mustang wasn't just a personal victory. It was a testament to the power of holding on to what matters, of turning loss into something meaningful. One evening, as I sat in the garage with the Mustang, I thought about everything it had taught me. Losing Dad had been one of the hardest things I'd ever faced, but reclaiming and restoring the Mustang had helped me feel like I still had a part of him with me. It wasn't about the car itself. It was about the love, memories, and lessons it represented. It was about the resilience it took to stand up for what was important, even when it felt like the odds were against me. I glanced at the empty passenger seat, imagining Dad sitting there with his easy grin and his calm, steady presence. "Thanks for teaching me," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. The Mustang had brought me closer to him, closer to myself, and even closer to the people around me. It had shown me that sometimes the things we fight for aren't just about the past. They're about building a future we can be proud of. And as the engine purred softly in the stillness of the garage, I knew that future was one worth driving toward. The Mustang had become a fixture in my life. Every drive, every polish, every admiring glance from strangers solidified its place as more than a car. It was a symbol, a living memory of my dad's passion, and a testament to the lessons I had learned through this long, emotional journey. One afternoon, as I was washing the car in the driveway, I noticed Mom standing on the porch. She wasn't holding a coffee mug or her phone like she usually did. She was just standing there, watching me. Her gaze lingered on the Mustang, her expression soft and thoughtful. I glanced up, catching her eye. "Everything okay?" I called out. She nodded, stepping off the porch and walking toward me. "Yeah, I've been thinking," she said, her voice unusually quiet. "About what?" I asked, turning off the hose and leaning against the car. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "About everything. About you, your dad, this car. I think I owe you another apology." I frowned, caught off guard. "Mom, you already apologized. You don't have to." "No, let me say this," she interrupted, holding up a hand. "I didn't just sell the car because I thought it was stuff. I sold it because I didn't think you could handle it." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. She sighed, looking down at her hands. "After your dad died, I felt like everything was falling apart. I was struggling to keep things together, and I guess I saw you as someone I needed to protect. I thought keeping the car around would just make things harder for you, that it would remind you of what we'd lost instead of helping you move forward." I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me understood where she was coming from, but another part of me bristled at the idea that she'd underestimated me so completely. "I was wrong," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "You've proven that to me. Watching you fight to get the car back, seeing the work you put into restoring it, the way you've honored your dad's memory. I don't think I've ever been prouder of you." Hearing those words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I felt like I was fighting this battle alone, like I was the only one who truly understood what the Mustang meant. To hear Mom finally acknowledge that not just the car, but everything it represented, meant everything. "You're more like your dad than I realized," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "He would have been so proud of you." I smiled, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." We stood there in silence for a while, the Mustang gleaming between us. I could see the memories playing out in her mind. Days spent watching Dad work on the car, the way his face would light up when he talked about his plans for it, the way he'd take us for drives with the windows down and the radio blaring. "It's funny," she said after a while. "I used to roll my eyes every time your dad talked about this car. I didn't get it. To me, it was just a car, just a hunk of metal that he spent too much time and money on. But now I see it differently." "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You," she said simply. "Seeing what you've done with it, how much it means to you, it's not just a car anymore. It's part of our family. It's part of him." From that day forward, something shifted between us. Mom began to take an active interest in the Mustang, not in the same way Dad had, but in her own quiet, supportive way. She'd ask about the maintenance, join me on the occasional Sunday drive, and even share stories about Dad that I'd never heard before. One afternoon, as we were sitting in the car, parked at one of Dad's favorite lookout spots, she turned to me and said, "You've made this into something he would have loved." He always talked about finishing the restoration, but I don't think even he could have done it this well. "That's high praise," I said, smiling. "It's the truth," she replied. "You've kept his dream alive, and in a way, you've made it your own. I hope you know how special that is." I did know. Every time I slid into the driver's seat, every time I felt the engine rumble to life beneath me, I knew. The Mustang wasn't just a tribute to Dad. It was a testament to everything he'd taught me about perseverance, love, and the importance of holding on to what matters. Jake, of course, stayed distant. He never admitted that he'd been wrong, and I didn't expect him to. But every once in a while, I'd catch him glancing at the Mustang with a mix of envy and something else. Regret, maybe, or a grudging respect. It didn't matter, though. His opinion wasn't something I needed anymore. The real victory was watching Mom's transformation, seeing her come to understand what the Mustang truly represented. Every time I caught her looking at the car, her expression soft and thoughtful, I knew she got it. She finally understood that it wasn't just a car. It was a lifetime of memories, a symbol of resilience and love, a legacy that would live on long after we were gone. Now, every Sunday when I take the Mustang out, I think about how far we've come. From the garage where Dad and I used to tinker, to the days of uncertainty and loss, to the triumphant moment when I reclaimed it as my own. It's been a journey unlike any other. The Mustang isn't just a car. It's a story of love, loss, and everything in between. And every time I see Mom looking at it, I know she'll never forget what it means, not just to me, but to all of us. That's the real victory.